More and more young men are leaving the UK to escape the rising cost of living, miserable weather, and mass immigration. But where are they moving to? Well, I'm going to break down exactly where they're moving to and rank them from best to worst place and most popular place, and also rank them in their pros and their cons so that you can decide where you want to go to and find some direction in your own life. So I think the most popular place that people are moving to, at least in my experience, is Australia. And so in my personal life, I know two people in my immediate friend circle who are moving to Australia, and I think it's just a top destination for people from the UK trying to escape, essentially. In terms of the benefits, I think that the fact that Australia is English speaking, it's a former Commonwealth country, I think that makes it one of the best destinations. You're not going to have to learn Spanish when you move there, or some other language. You can immediately fit in with the culture because it's very similar to the UK if you're from the UK, and even America in some ways. So it's great in that regard. I also think the job opportunities are great, also the local job opportunities. In a lot of these places that people suggest that you live or that you go and live, the job opportunities are pretty poor because the countries are poor. And that means that you have to do entrepreneurial endeavors when you move there. Whereas in Australia, I believe you can join local jobs, and the people I know who are moving out there are getting local jobs. So in that regard, it's pretty great. I think also the lifestyle is a massive pro. People out there, the weather is so great that people just go and they'll go surfing, they'll go hanging out on the beach, and doing a lot more outdoors activities, which I think will benefit your mental health. Because I know if you live in the UK, I think people's mental health is harmed drastically by the winter months. They don't get out, they don't do stuff, they don't get vitamin D because it's never sunny like it is now, which I'm pretty lucky for today. So yeah, that's a reason to move to Australia. I think also that it's not quite easy, it's never easy to get a visa, but it's reasonably easy to get a visa, especially if you're a UK citizen. So that's something also to bear in mind. But I think in terms of cons, there are a few cons with Australia. So first up, I think a lot of the issues that we have in the UK, Australia also similarly has, and people don't bear this in mind, I think. Australia has issues with immigration, although not as bad as England. I don't think anywhere is really as bad as England. Maybe Sweden is as bad as England, but they have issues with immigration, so that's something to bear in mind. And also they have a cost of living crisis as well, especially when it comes to housing. Housing can be very expensive, and the cost of living in Melbourne, Sydney, in these cities is very expensive. So that's something you need to bear in mind, that money doesn't go as far as it does in Southeast Asia or Central America. So if you're trying to get away from the issues that the UK is facing, I don't think Australia is the best place for you to go, because it's not as much of a culture shift or a culture shock that Southeast Asia might be, or a similar country, because it's just so similar to the UK and it has some similar problems. But if you're somewhat happy in the UK, it's just the weather which mainly gets you down, or the people, then maybe Australia would be good for you. If you come from the UK or you live in the UK, moving to Australia, I think it's also important to consider the distance to the UK. It's about a day of flying, which you might be able to get over, but you can't just go and visit friends or family, say if you lived in Spain and Portugal. Which brings me on to my next point, Spain and Portugal. I want to give an honourable mention to those countries, which I think they're great countries that a lot of people are moving to. I think similarly with Australia, that's why I'm batching them in this section. A lot of people from the UK are moving to these countries, to Spain and Portugal, because they're not completely unhappy with the Western way of things, but they want a change. So they're moving to Spain and Portugal, whether it be the weather or even Cyprus. Less bureaucracy and a different lifestyle. But again, Spain and Portugal have the same issues with immigration, although Portugal has a much lower cost of living, so that's something to bear in mind. Okay, so I'd say that the next most popular place that people are going to, especially young men, is Southeast Asia, whether it be Thailand, Vietnam, or Malaysia, or any other country around that area. I believe that Southeast Asia has some amazing pros to it. I think the climate is amazing. If you like hot weather, obviously that's subjective. You might love cold weather, and if you do, then you're weird, but Southeast Asia in general is relatively safe. I wouldn't be surprised if it's safer than the UK in some areas, and so that's something to bear in mind. It also has a thriving expat community. A lot of young men are moving to Southeast Asia, which means that in these apartment condos that you see these fake gurus in, there's a lot of fellow fake gurus. And I'm not saying you move there to be a fake guru, but it's something to bear in mind that there's people who know what you're doing, they understand it, and you can share your experiences with. So that might be another reason why it's good for you, and it's good for networking. The cost of living in Southeast Asia is just so low. So again, this is why it beats Australia in some ways, is because you can survive on such a small amount that you can move immediately, almost immediately as you gain your first few clients. You can move out there and have some independence and live a good lifestyle. So that's something to bear in mind. But then again, moving on to the cons of Southeast Asia is how far it is from the UK. You know, if you want to see friends, family, it's going to be hard. But that's something you need to take into account. Unlike Australia, also there's going to be a massive language barrier with the locals. And I don't believe people do speak English, but it's helpful to know the local language. So that might be an issue as well for you. If you're not good at learning other languages, or you don't want to, then it might be rough for you. I also don't think local job opportunities are that great, especially if you can't speak the local language. I can't imagine you'd be able to get a job whatsoever. So that's something to bear in mind. If you go there, you're gonna have to be one of these entrepreneurial persons who isn't working for the local economy and is running their own business, whatever that is, you know. And I know I said that Southeast Asia is relatively safe, but I believe there's been some political instability recently, so that's something you must also bear in mind. You'll probably be fine, but you might need to be able to have an escape plan, if that makes sense, just for your own safety. But I think most of the time you're completely safe in terms of crime, local level crime on that high. Okay, now I'm going to move on to something that you don't hear people saying. I've not actually ever heard anybody say this, but Eastern Europe is a good place that people are moving to, and it's not common. So I think Eastern Europe is a great place for young men to move to. You're moving to a place with highly traditional values. For example, Poland or Czech Republic. The cost of living, again, is just laughably low, which is great for you. I believe red tape is limited in terms of bureaucracy. Setting up your businesses, etc., is relatively low. Crime, especially in Poland, I believe Poland is safer than the UK, although I haven't checked the statistics for that, but I believe so. Especially in Poland, the local industries are thriving and they're growing, which means that if you want to go out there and you want to reuse your skills you've learned in the UK, you can. You don't have to stick within entrepreneurial endeavors, which makes it safer in some regards, because as an entrepreneur, you're taking on risk, whereas if you're an employee, you're reducing that risk. You know what salary is coming in. Obviously, you've got less upside potential, but the downside risk is limited. So that's another massive benefit. Again, another benefit of moving to Eastern Europe is that you're gaining massive cultural enrichment. The people there, they love their culture, and you're going to experience it to its fullest extent, to the maximum potential that you can by moving out there. So I think it's a great opportunity to learn about different cultures. Poland also has extremely low tax maybe not extremely low, but it has very low tax compared to the UK. I think it's around 32% at the maximum cap. So that's another huge benefit. And Poland also has very low immigration, which, if you're leaving the UK, is probably a positive for you. So that's something to bear in mind. In terms of cons, I think that obviously you're going to have to learn a new language, Polish or whatever language, although they are Latin based, which will make it easier if you're an English speaker, especially compared to Russian or some equivalent, Mandarin. The salaries are lower in Poland and these Eastern European countries, so that's something to bear in mind. You might want to, they aren't terrible, but they're just lower. But you'll probably be able to have a nice lifestyle if you were just to stay as an employee there rather than doing your own entrepreneurial endeavors. And I think the biggest con, and it's probably the reason why I won't move to Poland or Eastern Europe anytime soon at least, is the Ukraine war. Obviously, as this Ukraine war carries on, Poland is right next to Ukraine, and let's say in a hypothetical scenario, Ukraine was to lose all of its territory to Russia, then Poland would be up against Russia and on its border. So I believe in that scenario, Poland will probably go to war with Russia, or it just wouldn't be a good scenario. It wouldn't be a safe environment to be in, and I wouldn't want to be in Poland if Russia was at its doorstep. So that's something to bear in mind. That's why I think that's a huge downside. That's why I'm not moving to Poland, although I would love to. So last of all, and I believe the least popular area, maybe Eastern Europe is least popular for people moving to, but last of all is South America, Central America. I'm just going to box these two together. I know they're not the same, but yeah, deal with it. So Central South America, I think that in terms of pros, in terms of tax is so low. I've been to Guatemala in Central America, and tax is 5%, so you're chilling in terms of tax. In terms of the community is so welcoming. People want to talk to you, especially if you're a foreigner. They don't see too many foreigners, at least when I went to Guatemala, and people are interested in you. They want to talk to you, and you get to see their culture and be culturally enriched. So it's great in that regard. The weather is amazing. So essentially South America is very hot, especially near the equator. Obviously Argentina is cooler, you can ski in Argentina, but Central America is the perfect temperature. It's on the Altiplano, I believe it's called, which is basically you have higher elevation, especially in Central America. I think it's around 1,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken. And because it's so high up, so it's near the equator, so it gets a lot of sun, and then it's so high up, you don't get much humidity. So it's around, in the summer seasons, it's around 20 to 25 degrees. So it's amazing in terms of the temperature. If you like the sun but don't want to be too hot, it's perfect, especially Central America. There's also a thriving expat community in Central America and South America, so that's something to be aware of. A lot of Americans go to those countries, so that's something to be aware of. It's a massive pro. Obviously, in terms of cons, there are a few. I think local opportunities for working are just almost negligible. Depends where you're at, but almost negligible. And it's not even worth considering because the pay is just going to be so crap because they're so poor. And obviously the cost of living is very low, but again, the pay is crap. In terms of cons, again, the safety can be a massive concern. There are some areas, especially if you've got some money, you're going to be pretty safe in South and Central America. You're going to be rather safe in most scenarios, but there's always something in the air where you can feel that, okay, something could go down, and people who have got guns, and yeah, there's definitely a sense of, okay, something could go down, I'll probably be fine, but if not, I'm probably going to die. Whereas in England, if something goes down, you're probably not going to die. You might get robbed, but you're not going to die. So that's something to be aware of. So essentially, that's my breakdown. You're going to have to decide what's best for you. Whether if you value safety, then maybe Eastern Europe or Australia would be a good pick for you. If you care slightly less about safety, you just want low cost of living, good vibes, maybe Central America, South America. But yeah, if you enjoyed, please feel free to subscribe and leave a comment giving me your opinion. I'm trying to help as many young men as I can just find some direction in their life, because I know that's what I needed when I was their age. So yeah, please feel free to subscribe.